You ever know someone who is totally comfortable just walking around in sweatpants and a t-shirt streaked with Frito dust or something? That one person who made midnight trips at Jack in the Box way more fun than it should have been. The one down for pretty much whatever and was really fun to be around because of how confident they were at just being themselves, despite how strange and smelly they could be at times. Well, Resident Evil 8, or Resident Evil Village, is basically that person if they were a video game. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying anything bad about the visuals or gameplay in this comparison, because I'm not. They're both very good. I'm talking more specifically about the overall experience of 8, because admittedly, the game is a bit of a mixed bag of great moments and weird decisions on the part of the developer, in which I sometimes wondered what Capcom was thinking. But, much like the person wearing the shirt covered in Frito dust, the more time you spend with it, the less those strange decisions bug you. So, I know this sounds suspiciously like, just turn your brain off. And, yeah, that is kind of what I'm saying here. But not to the overwhelming degree that other things might require of you. It's more in the way that if you can be chill so as not to miss the forest for the trees, then there's definite value to be found and a good time to be had. That being said, there were definitely some janky trees that were interesting, to say the least. So, don't worry. I won't pretend like they don't exist during this review, because they were everything ranging from eye-rollingly terrible to outright hilarious and will be talked about. But before we really get into it, I need to quickly say that I'm fully aware of the memes about Chris's approach in continuing the Redfield bloodline, and I know he's a bit more aggressive than he was with Leon. And yeah, I know all about the internet's profound levels of thirst for Lady... damn. How do I say her name again?
Mommytrescu?
Oh, right. But yeah, this is my first review ever, and as such, I need to establish myself as a serious reviewer. So I won't be making any jokes about Chris's quest to secure the Redfield bloodline or any inappropriate observations about a Lady Mommytrescu. God damn it. Anywho, from this point on, there will be spoilers until closing thoughts, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, skip ahead to this timestamp. Alright, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, here we go. Resident Evil 8 presents itself very well visually. Lady Mommytrescu's castle is a really good example of this. I mean, just look at how good everything looks. The amount of detail that went into pretty much everything is absolutely crazy. And while the other areas and models aren't necessarily as well crafted or intricate in their details, they're also very well done. Except for this area. It sucks and I hate it. However, while Capcom does a great job with the graphical presentation, some of their voice acting decisions left something to be desired. An example of this is how all of the voice acting for all the villagers is just so out of place, and not in a funny way.
Maybe a familiar voice. Louisa! Open up, it's me, Elena!
Stop shouting. You'll draw the monsters.
Julian, calm down.
Who's this?
A friend!
Stay back.
Father! For God's sake, Julian, let us in.
No, they'll smell the blood. You'll endanger us all.
My father will die out here.
That's not my problem.
What's going on?
Like, it's not that the voice acting itself is all that bad, most of the time. It's that they all had American accents. Isn't this game supposed to take place in some woodsy village in Eastern Europe? Why is everyone speaking with perfect American accents? I mean, fine, I know I'm being a bit of a bitch about this, but listen to this.
Hey, Doc.
Hello, Mr. Winters. I've got your daughter's results back, and I'd like you to come in to talk about them. How about next Thursday, 4 o'clock?
This character has an accent. Why couldn't Capcom do it for the villagers too? And before you start thinking, hey, shouldn't that mean the main antagonists, like Lady Mommytrescu, should have had some kind of accent? Yeah, they probably should. But the reason why I'm focusing more on the villagers is because, well, they're the villagers. They represent the natives of whatever part of Europe this is. So when you hear them speaking with American accents, it just sounds so out of place and takes you out of the game, which sucks. Speaking of the main antagonists, and the other characters as well, Capcom does a great job with their visual design and general characterization. Each of the characters in this game, even the ones I don't like all that much, are easily recognizable and distinct. I mean, we got the hype machine that is Lady Mommytrescu and her big titty goth daughters, Beneviento and her spooky doll, Moreau the sad fish boy, Heisenberg, who is basically what you get if you mix Nicolas Cage energy with the dude from the Big Lebowski, gave him Magneto powers, and dressed him up like he was from Yarnum. And for those of you who don't know what that is, Yharnam is a city from Bloodborne, the best game FromSoft has ever put out, and to any who disagree, I would be more than willing to educate you as to why you were incorrect at the Taco Bell parking lot of your choice. You donkey. What was I talking about again? Oh, yeah. He also apparently appreciates pretty okay found footage movies, and I suspect he is a bit of a weeb, but more about that later. We've also got the big bad, Miranda, who's neat, I guess. Duke, a baby-faced angel of a shopkeeper who can do no wrong and actually has a role in the story, unlike lesser shopkeepers. Chris, inciting incident Redfield. Mia, who I had to add during editing because I forgot to mention her while writing the script for this review. And finally, Ethan. So you can sum up this character with two things. The first is that he is prone to making some exceptionally bad decisions. Like, the things he decides to do as a character are just wildly dumb sometimes. But the second thing is that he grows on you, becoming a pretty endearing character by the end of the game. I know some people disagree on that second thing, but despite some terrible and sometimes repetitive lines he has, which seems to be most people's problems with him, and to be honest, it is a bit grating sometimes.
You're the one who's cursed.
I think that the majority of his dumbassery and cheese are kind of charming when mixed with the already pretty wacky vibe of the Resident Evil game and the confidence he gains as the game progresses. I'm also a bit of a sucker for the whole parent hell-bent on saving their kid story, so maybe that's playing into my opinion about Ethan a bit. Let me be clear though, I'm not saying he is the greatest character ever written, I'm saying he's endearing and entertaining. And isn't this offensively mediocre and or bad character that some people are making him out to be? Moving on to general enemies, they're also well designed aesthetically and are pretty varied in the visual department. Like, we got wolf guys with different outfits, armored wolf guys, big wolf guys, ghoul dudes with swords and axes, flappy ghouls, and all of Heisenberg's metal boys. Finally, this game presents itself in a way very reminiscent of Resident Evil 4. This can be seen in the setting of the European village with the castle, the giant fish, and pretty much everything else. However, while that is all well and good, it does cause the game to be a bit more action-oriented than Resident Evil 7 was, making 8 overall far less scary than 7 was, which is kind of a bummer in my opinion. The gameplay for Resident Evil 8 is very well done. The controls are tight and responsive, the field of view is appropriate for the game, the enemies are engaging, all the weapons and equipment feel good to use, and the AI is usually fine. I also appreciate most of the boss fights, and just to be clear, I use the word appreciate because of how it doesn't necessarily mean I enjoy them. This distinction is important because of the sad fish boy, who, as I keep saying, is the worst. Because you see, unlike the other bosses who have awesome little set pieces or neat little gimmicks, Fish Boy's boss fight is just a standard Resident Evil meat blob you run away from for a while who eats a bunch of your resources before finally exploding. I mean, it's a very Resident Evil-y boss fight, and I guess I can't get too upset about it being in a Resident Evil game, but it just isn't enjoyable and I wish they'd put more effort into it. Another aspect of the gameplay which is pretty cool is the map and how the game handles exploration. The game is this semi-open world thing in which the 4 main areas you'll explore are centered around the village itself, which acts as a kind of hub you'll constantly backtrack through after clearing each area. This is pretty cool because of how you can use keys and other stuff you collect in those areas to open locked doors and access hidden areas you couldn't previously in the village, meaning there's a lot of stuff to do for players who like to explore. Unfortunately though, unless you are playing on harder difficulties, the rewards you get for opening every locked door and finding every secret thing doesn't really impact you all that much, as normal mode is pretty easy and you will likely not need the extra supplies. But Even if you are playing on normal, you should do it anyway, for the lore, if you're into that kind of thing. All that being said though, there were definitely some not so great gameplay stuff, like that bit about the difficulty. I played on normal and hardcore, and while normal is very easy, hardcore amps up the difficulty by making the enemies soak more bullets and taking away your ability to naturally heal a bit over time when you're a hit away from death. This adds to the game by making ammo more scarce, because you'll be spending more bullets to kill things, meaning that running away or using your knife is sometimes the only way to go, which is supposed to make the gameplay more tense. However, this method of increasing the difficulty by making everything have more health can be annoying to some people and just feel like artificial difficulty. I am one of these people. The reason I say this is because I played the game with a controller and refused to switch to mouse and keyboard, because I'm a stubborn idiot. This decision made hardcore feel obnoxious due to all the times I ended up missing because of being bad, coupled with how controllers are in first-person shooters. So, why am I babbling about this? Well, sweet viewer, this is the roundabout way of explaining why I think people using controllers who suck at first-person shooters will have more fun in standard mode, despite it being very easy. But to everyone else, you should go with hardcore probably. It'll provide an okay challenge and most likely be more enjoyable. Oh yeah, there's also Village of Shadows difficulty. I didn't get through it because it was taking too long to clear, and I wanted to start figuring out how Adobe Premiere works. But it seems like Matt has difficulty from Resident Evil 7, with the whole changed enemy placement and punishing difficulty, which was really fun. So if you like pain and fantasize about Lady Mommytrescu stepping on you, I wholeheartedly suggest trying it out. On a final note before moving on to the plot, there are puzzles in this game, but they're all pretty easy, to the point that I kind of feel a bit insulted by Capcom. Like, I'm not saying to make them super obtuse or unintuitive, like some other games, but they don't have to be so boring and straightforward either. Alright, let's see if we can get through this one quick. The game starts out with Mia dropping major spoilers in a story she's telling to her and Ethan's baby daughter, Rose. Then Ethan gets lost in his house for a bit on his way to put Rose to bed, after which he goes back downstairs to chill with Mia for a bit when all of a sudden bullets start flying. Chris shows up, shoots Mia some more, and kidnaps Rose, all while refusing to tell Ethan anything before having him knocked out.
I said get your hands off her! Ethan, no.
Ethan wakes up sometime later to find himself face down in the snow next to a car accident somewhere in the woods. He wanders off into the forest and eventually finds himself in a spooky village, providing some really insightful comments as he makes his way through the deserted streets and houses.
Maybe they're out.
An old man with aim similar to mine gives Ethan a gun. There's some wolf boys, a bit of hand torture, some fighting, and a mystical bell of contrivance that rings somewhere off in the distance and saves Ethan from certain death. Then there's a not at all suspicious old lady who has a conversation with Ethan, after which he meets some confused villagers with American accents. They provide some exposition.
There is no safe! Every sorry bastard out there has been ripped in half!
But it doesn't go well and their house catches fire. Unsure of what to do now, Ethan tries to escape the burning building by using a dilapidated truck he finds. It doesn't work out, so instead he tries to escape out the second-story window with the kinda cute villager. Now outside, the last American villager is killed by Miranda, and Ethan is confronted by a real brain teaser of a puzzle, which opens the path to Lady Mommytrescu's castle. But as he's making his way there, he meets Heisenberg for the first time, who uses his magneto powers to impale Ethan and drag him off, all while being almost too charismatic.
Bet you're whining. We're almost there.
Ethan comes to in a church surrounded by Miranda and her 4 lords, of which there is Heisenberg, Beneviento, Lady Mommytrescu, and Fishboy, who are engaging in some banter.
Brother, shut the fuck up!
Then Ethan is allowed to run off into the death obstacle course below as entertainment for the 4 lords and Miranda.
You're still alive?
I think. I'm not actually sure if they can see what's happening, unless there's cameras, maybe, I guess. After getting away, Ethan meets best shopkeeper Duke, before finally entering Lady Mommytrescu's castle to begin his search for Rose. However, soon after entering, Big Titty Goths drag Ethan off to meet their mom. It's a bit awkward, and she has them string him up by a couple hooks before they all leave him by himself?
Wait, what are you doing?
Something even Ethan is confused by. Feeling lonely almost right away, he rips out the hooks and fixes himself up with a bottle of herb juice he finds. Ethan then wanders off, meets up with best shopkeeper again, who, if you're lucky, will say the thing.
What are you buying? Just something an old friend of mine used to say.
After some shopping, it's time to explore the castle. For expediency's sake, here are the highlights.
Boom! Bam! Bop! Bada bop boom! Pow!
Stupid man thing!
So after making his way through the castle, Ethan eventually finds the +3 poisonous lore dagger in the church, before getting fingered by Lady Mommytrescu. But because Ethan is stronger than you or I, he manages to resist the call of the mummy milkers through sheer force of will and stabs her with the lore dagger, forcing her to transform into her true form. Dragon? Centaur? Centaur dragon? Whatever. Anyways, Ethan drops his lore dagger before the dragon centaur kindly scoops him up and takes him to the boss arena, in which Ethan will throw some shade,
Looks like your outside matches your inside.
run around on the roof of the castle, shoot, listen to Lady Mommytrescu talk shit, shoot some more, fall from an unsurvivable height, get up, deliver a bad line,
You're the one who's cursed.
and pick up a dirty flask, which causes the wall to open up.
Looks like I'm getting out of this place.
Ethan continues on, talks to the not at all suspicious old woman again, finds a key, gets teased by Capcom,
Wait a second. That looks familiar.
and runs around for a bit. He finds Duke again, who tells him about the dirty flask.
Why, you have your daughter right in your own hands.
What are you saying?
Take a closer look. That flask seems to contain her head.
Duke then explains that he needs Ethan to go visit someone in the village before he can continue taking an expository dump on him. So naturally, Ethan goes off into the village, shooting wolf boys, crawling under stuff, figuring out how numbers work, and overall just establishing himself as the peak of the food chain. All of this culminates with Ethan eventually reaching the house with the red chimney, inside which he finds lore, which explains that Rose has been split up amongst the 4 lords, and he finds a diagram about how to Voltron keys together. After this discovery, he hustles back to Duke, who finishes that previously promised expository dump, and tells Ethan what to do next, all while continuing to show why he's best shopkeeper.
Settle down. First, you must use that key and collect all of your little Rose's flasks.
Now armed with new information and some clear next steps, Ethan is ready to continue in his quest to save his daughter. Now making his way to the next lord, Beneviento, Ethan braves spooky mists, spooky dolls, spooky bridges, spooky lack of goat recognition, spooky ghosts, and a spooky elevator ride. Then after all this, he eventually finds himself at Beneviento's spooky house, or as the internet has dubbed it, Dollhouse. Now, before I go on, I just need to talk about my overall feelings about this area. Some people say Dollhouse is not actually scary and is actually kinda cringe because of how big of a tonal shift it is from the rest of the game, while other people say it's the scariest thing ever made, now and forever. I personally land somewhere in the middle. I'm honestly a desensitized husk of a human being, so it isn't all that scary to me. But that doesn't mean I don't think it's interesting and pretty well done, because I do. It reminds me a lot of the PT demo, with its dark, claustrophobic hallways and general ambience. And because of how Konami aborted Silent Hills, I'm always craving more of that general vibe, especially when it's done well, like it is here. I'm also not opposed to the shift from action to the more standard horror during this section. It's a brief change of pace, and I'm honestly here for it, like I have been for the past few Resident Evil games. Anyways, back on point. Ethan opens the front door and steps inside, and it's actually pretty chill. He walks around the house for a bit, there's some lore, a picture of Beneviento looking pretty cute, there's a doll asserting its dominance over the living room, a chest which will forever haunt me.
What's in the box? What's in the fucking box?
After a while, he eventually comes across an elevator which takes him downstairs. Now, a lot of stuff happens down here, so I'll condense it a bit. Beneviento's doll, Angie, steals your stuff.
What? Wait, where's my gun?
There's some okay puzzles, a little bit of ghost radio, and yeah, I'd rather show the next part instead of tell you about it. So here's some footage of a rhetoric Viking / political streamer and his interaction with what comes next.
Oh my god!
After Ethan escapes the baby and gets back into the main house, it's time to confront Beneviento and Angie.
Don't leave. I can't let you.
You're still alive, huh? Before my friends murder you! TikTok! Your life song alive.
Wait!
Like the general opinions about Dollhouse, opinions about this boss fight are a bit polarizing. The reason for this is probably because it's essentially Ethan playing hide and seek with Angie and boiling down to...
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
Stupid idiot!
It's over.
Destroy.
I personally don't mind how this boss is handled, but that's probably because I like the area as a whole. It's not hard to imagine that most people who don't like this fight are also the ones who think the area itself doesn't really belong in the game. But to those people I say that, it's okay. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, no matter how wrong it is. But anyways, after Beneviento is dealt with, Ethan gets another piece of the Voltron key, a rose flask rises from the floor on a podium near the front door, and surprise, Ethan's stuff is back. It turns out that he had it all along, and just hallucinated that he didn't. Thank goodness Beneviento didn't use her ability to control his perception of reality better. So Ethan grabs the rose flask and continues on. After fighting his way through some spooky boys and stopping to read some lore, Ethan arrives back in the village and checks in with Duke.
Does this look familiar to you?
Then he makes his way over to visit the sad fish boy and his boring area, and almost right away, Ethan and the fish boy have a very, interesting interaction. Okay, Ethan, there it is. Let's get it. Nice, good job. Okay, let's go.
Mother Miranda, if it's for you, I'd do anything.
Ethan? What are you doing?
I'll just be taking this.
Okay, got it. Talk a bit of trash, no problem. I get it. Fish boy sucks, but that's enough.
Oh, you have something to say?
What do you mean, mother's special child?
No. Ethan? No. Stop it. Just go.
Don't screw with me!
Wait, please. If you take it, then the others will laugh at me.
Aw. No. Screw you, Capcom. You won't trick me into feeling bad for Fish Boy.
Longer, please.
What's so funny?
You're stupid. You talk too much. It's all over. I plugged the way in.
What are you...
This is my territory. And I won't let you leave.
Shit.
God damn it, Ethan. So, after the Battle of the Mines concludes, Fishboy's garbage zone really begins, and Ethan needs to find a way out and back into the village. He wanders around for a bit, finds a boat and zips through the water, gets out of the boat, wrestles a guy wearing Call of Duty stuff and jeans, has an ominous talk with Chris,
You stay out of our business, Ethan.
who's still being very mysterious, and then there's a fish attack. After swimming around for a little, Ethan manages to get out of the water, only for Fishboy to come crawling out and say something dumb.
Exit's underwater. You're done.
He then proceeds to fall back into the water and transforms back into the rude fish monster who just interrupted Chris and Ethan's conversation. So Ethan runs off across some floating platforms and the rooftops of submerged buildings as Fishboy tries to eat him. There's also some stuff with windmills to power a sluice gate. There's this line.
Caught myself a big one.
Whatever, I'm done with this place. We're skipping ahead a bit. He ends up draining the water by solving a puzzle to open the sluice gate, which only Fishboy could have set up because of how the solution is literally drawn on a note attached to the puzzle itself. It's dumb and uninteresting, but I guess that's kind of the theme of this section of the game. After doing all this, Ethan descends into the previously submerged area where he finds some items and lore, somehow undamaged by the years they spent underwater. Then there's a boss fight with Fishboy, which, as mentioned earlier in this video, is a very standard boss fight for a Resident Evil game. Big blob chases you around an arena, you dump resources into it, and eventually it explodes.
Destroy.
To be fair though, I guess Capcom does attempt to make this fight a bit more interesting by trying to make you feel some sympathy for Fishboy. Unfortunately though, Capcom never really developed this character to a point that I actually care about him, not even a little, so it doesn't really have any meaningful impact. Actually, I've changed my mind. There's no redeeming qualities about this fight, or this character. Fishboy only exists to pad the runtime of the game and to be a callback to the giant fish from Resident Evil 4. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, is Beneviento really any better? Capcom never really spent any time on her either. And that's true, she barely had any character, but at least her area is interesting and she's got a neat little character design, thus adding something more than overall runtime to the game. The whole character that is Fishboy is just lazy on Capcom's part. On the bright side though, the area and the boss fight is pretty easy and not too long. So, after Fishboy blows up, Ethan finds his room and vandalizes it. But it turns out that Heisenberg has some kind of surveillance set up in Fishboy's room because he suddenly starts communicating with Ethan through the TV after the last part of the Voltron key is found. He and Ethan talk for a bit.
But what's the plan when you have all 4 flasks?
What are you trying to get at?
I could lend you a hand.
Not trying to get on my good side?
Now don't get cocky. I'd kill you if you weren't worth the trouble. There's a stronghold not too far outside the village. Go there and get my flask. Do that, and you pass. First, head back to the graveyard.
Self-centered prick.
So, he runs back to the village, only stopping for things of the utmost importance. And upon getting back to the village, Ethan somehow manages to not get lost and wastes no time in making his way to the 4th and final flask. Using his now complete Voltron key, he opens the gate leading to some ruins in which there is pretty much non-stop fighting. It's pretty fun, I guess. And at the end of it all, there's an encounter which I found engaging and left me feeling quite satisfied. After beating the big hammer dude, Ethan finds the last flask and has some more TV time with Heisenberg.
Quit hiding, asshole. I'm not letting you get out of this.
Cool your jets. Just a little bit more, and you're all wrapped up. I'll lend you a hand. So in exchange...
In exchange what?
First of all, come to me. Put all the flasks in the altar, and I'm sure you'll figure the rest out.
So naturally, he does this, causing a bridge leading to the big Magneto's factory to rise from the river. When he gets inside, he immediately runs into Heisenberg, whose voice actor, Neil Newborn, really lays on the Nicolas Cage energy, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Look, you got this all wrong. Tell me what I'm talking about. Shut your fucking hole! Sorry. Take a seat.
He actually walked over to the hole.
Listen, Ethan, you're being played.
What are you talking about? You think this is a game?
I said sit! Lady, supersized bitch. Ugly ass psycho doll. An emeronic freak. Don't you get it? It's a test. To see if you're strong enough to be a part of Miranda's family.
I don't want to be a part of Miranda's family.
Neither did I, but here we are!
Anyways, the conversation is summed up by this exchange.
My daughter is not a weapon. Fuck you!
Last chance. You don't want to find out what's in that hole.
I'll take my chances.
You're futile.
On a side note, it was this moment which really cemented my positive opinion about Ethan. He was just a normal dude in Resident Evil 7, but look at him now, just emanating that Chad energy. The guy might be guilty of some bad decisions and awkward dialogue, but it's honestly hard to outright dislike him, especially if he's stuck around this long. But to all of you out there who still think he's just terrible and believe characters like Leon, Chris, and Jill are way better, are they actually better than the character Ethan has become in Resident Evil 8? Please, think hard about it.
No thanks, bro.
So yeah, he falls into the hole and meets Propeller Man. After escaping, Ethan finds himself in the depths of the factory, in which he will fight his way through hordes of poor souls with VR headsets bolted to their skulls, a flashback to one of the worst bosses in a Resident Evil game, and some dudes cosplaying as some janky-looking Gundams. So, bringing it back to something I mentioned earlier, remember when I mentioned that Heisenberg might be a weeb? Alright, bear with me here. It's fair to say that Resident Evil is set in a science fiction-y universe, so it's not totally outside the realm of possibility that there might be some early VR MMOs in this universe, like ones that would still require players to physically move their bodies outside the game. Alright, granted all that, may I present to you the future of VR MMO gaming. See? They're grinding something, in all likelihood for Heisenberg. Which brings me to why Heisenberg is a weeaboo. Only the weebiest of games would require an entire factory of slave labor for grinding. You know the types of games, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you're lucky, and I'm happy for you. Anywho, deeper within the factory, Ethan eventually bumps into Heisenberg again, who seems busy.
Not bad. Not bad. You're persistent. But I've got a rebellion. So stay out of it.
So he punches Ethan off a ledge and into some water hundreds of feet below. Unsure of what to do now, Ethan crawls out of the water, making sure to drop a line before doing what he does best. After wandering forward in a generally linear fashion, Ethan finds some plot.
I told you to leave it alone, Ethan!
The following chat with Chris is, interesting.
That wasn't her. It was Miranda.
What?
She's a bioweapon. She changed her appearance and pretended to be Mia. Except she also survived being shot, so now I'm here to finish the job.
Bullshit! Why'd you fucking tell me right away?
Because I knew you would want to be involved!
Okay, So I guess it makes sense that Chris thought Ethan would want to be involved if it appeared that some spooky bioweapon took Mia's place, despite any potential for danger. Seeing how the man didn't turn back after seeing this thing at the beginning of his search for Mia in the previous game. But wouldn't it have been a good idea to take Ethan aside at some point and let him know what's going on? It could have been during all that military training.
Chris moving us here, military training, it all happened so fast.
It could have gone something like, "Hey Ethan, Mia's been replaced by a spooky bioweapon, and here's some proof." Then they could have figured out how to get Rose away from her, and then Chris and friends can go shoot up Miranda. The game could have even progressed fairly normally if this had been done instead. Or maybe Ethan tips off Miranda by not being a very good actor, causing her to either run away with Rose, making Ethan go after her and end up in the village anyway, or maybe Chris and friends are waiting near the house, and after things start going sideways with Miranda and Ethan, they bust in and start shooting. And the game could proceed as normal with her derailing the convoy and taking Rose into the village. The point is, it's weird that Chris decided to keep this a secret, and honestly was purely just included on Capcom's part to make it seem like Chris had gone bad and add a twist or something, of which I'm fairly certain literally everyone saw coming. Oh well, it is what it is, I suppose. There are a couple more details brought up later in the game which complicate why he didn't tell Ethan, but I'll talk more about that later when it comes up. But anyways, the rest of the speech can be boiled down to...
Take a look at this. My men sent those pictures a few minutes ago. Keep looking.
Rose. Holy shit, we gotta go!
Take that elevator. I'll meet you topside. I promise you, we will get your daughter back. Together.
Damn straight.
All right, Ethan. You take this, and do me a favor. Try to stay on the way.
Now, before we go on, I just need to address the majestic tank in the room. Yes, I know its existence makes basically zero sense, even for a Resident Evil game. I know it was made by Heisenberg, and yes, I am aware that for some reason, he made it out of materials he can't manipulate with his powers. But you know what? Getting into this tank marks the start of a boss fight which feels as though it was designed by Platinum Games, and that just makes me love this weird-ass thing with a mounted chainsaw and cannon. On an unrelated note, Capcom, please, let Platinum make a spin-off game about Joe Baker from Resident Evil 7. I really need it, Capcom, please do this for me. So yeah, this boss fight is wild, but instead of talking about it, why don't I just show you what makes it so great? Without spoiling the entire boss fight of Heisenberg, here's how you feel starting the fight. And here's how you feel later in the fight. Oh, and he says this. Which, for those of you who are living under a rock that Chris hasn't gotten to yet, is referring to This honestly raises a couple of questions, which only leads to some bizarre possibilities. For instance, was Heisenberg hanging out in the volcano and watching? If so, why? Or maybe there was a recording somehow. But how and why did he watch it? Or my personal favorite, maybe Chris wrote a report about the events in the volcano for whoever he reports to and wrote in it, "And then I punched the shit out of this boulder until it got the fuck out of the way." Perhaps Heisenberg saw this report, I don't know, but within the context of this hilariously out-of-place boss fight, I loved that Capcom included the reference. Now, some of the more critical video game enjoyers might find this boss fight to be too far removed from the standard Resident Evil boss fight, and that it detracts from the experience, and honestly, it is definitely a bit different. However, as I've talked about with Fishboy and his boss fight, I feel the usual formula has gotten a bit stale. So, while this boss battle is kinda crazy and something similar should probably be avoided in the future if Capcom ever decides to make a more serious horror game, it is definitely a nice change of pace that did not overstay its welcome, much like how the Dollhouse is, and it enriches the overall experience of Resident Evil 8. So, after Heisenberg is dealt with, Miranda shows up and tears out Ethan's heart, killing him before he can fix it with herb juice. This actually surprised me. Good job, Capcom. The screen blacks out, and the player steps into the shoes of Chris, who is made aware of Ethan's demise over a Zoom call while chilling in his car just outside the village.
Captain, I've confirmed the death of Ethan Winters.
And through the implementation of screen sharing, Chris gives a story recap from his side of things.
Yesterday, we took down the transformed Miranda, but we didn't kill her.
Who knew she could fake being a corpse?
Since Miranda could have infected Ethan, I forcefully took him and Rose with us. But the vehicle they were riding in was attacked. When I got to the wreck, Ethan and Rose were gone. The last time I was able to contact Ethan, I heard Miranda's voice. She murdered him, and she is not gonna get away with it.
With this new revelation, let me just jump back to my previous bit about Chris telling Ethan about what was going on. Hey Ethan, Mia's been replaced by a spooky bioweapon, and here's some proof. Oh, and can we run a couple of tests to make sure you aren't infected or something? Or, I guess since I already told you everything, you should change that "can we run a couple of tests" to "we are gonna run a couple of tests" instead, okay? But once again, we'll come back to this later and add a couple of things, as more details emerge a bit later in the game that'd make this not quite work. When the recap's over, Chris gets out of the car and he and his team make their way into the village. Now, some people aren't fans of this portion of the game because it feels too Call of Duty-y, and I can see where they're coming from. But at the same time, Chris and friends are like highly trained soldiers. Doesn't it make sense that playing as Chris would feel similar to the video game industry's most popular presentation of elite soldiers doing elite soldier things? Admittedly, I guess the actual playing part could have been cut in favor of a long cutscene or something instead. But to be honest, this part of the game didn't really bother me all that much. Well, it never achieved the same levels of hype as the Heisenberg fight, and to be clear, I wouldn't have particularly cared all that much if it had somehow been cut out. Playing as the overpowered muscle beast known as Chris for a bit didn't really sour my experience. So after Chris fights his way through hordes of enemies and an encore of the best boss ever, he finds the source of the mold, which I just realized I haven't mentioned at all in this review. The mold is a colloquial name for the bioweapon responsible for the events of this game, with a modified version of it being used in 7. The details are covered in greater depth within the lore scattered throughout the game for those who enjoy the over-the-top science fiction of it all, but this review has become far too long, so we're not really going to get into it. So, he football throws a bomb duct taped to a knife at it.
And 2 explosives armed. There's enough there to blow the whole village sky high.
Let's get out of here and blow the damn place.
Not before I end Miranda.
And goes deeper into the caves to search for Miranda. And as he's going, a member of Chris and Friends hits him with some truth.
I know it's too late now, but we really should have told Ethan the plan.
There wasn't time. We didn't expect Miranda to act so soon.
Even so, you should have told him.
Yeah.
Oh, no time, huh? Not here?
Ethan, no.
I mean, you literally had him dragged out of his house by his feet. How are you gonna say that there wasn't enough time, Chris? Whatever. Anyways, he stumbles onto Miranda's lab, or as it's also known, the lore room, in which there's incredibly based books.
Hello? Is this the goddamn base department? Because holy shit!
Interesting notes and some pictures. It's also probably worth mentioning that in one of the notes there's some 11th hour backstory reveals from Miranda. It appears that she took Rose because she wants to use her as a vessel to revive the daughter she lost to the Spanish flu 100 years ago. Oh, yeah. Mia's in here too. Alive. Surprise. I wonder why Miranda decided to keep her alive.
I was caught in Houston experiments.
Oh, okay. Moving on.
He's dead. I'm sorry, Mia, but we have to leave. We have to destroy this village.
No! You're wrong. I tried to keep this a secret, but...
Oh? And what's that? Is the most important bit of lore in this room something about Chadton?
You don't understand how special he is.
What's this?
What's going on?
A dream sequence.
here. God, freezing. This shit in my body.
You're so dumb.
Hey. Well, actually that's kinda true. Still rude though. Okay, this is going a bit too long. Here's the Cliff Notes version.
You're dead.
Dead? I mean, Miranda. She...
Wrong. It wasn't Miranda. You were always dead.
What are you saying? I can still...
See? Miranda didn't kill you. You mean you didn't think it was weird? No matter how much you got hurt? 3 years ago, Baker House. You were murdered by Jack.
What happened? I did all that. Rose. Mia.
Now do you get it? Your whole body is nothing but mold. You can't ever see your family again.
No. I will save Rose.
So, I actually think this twist is pretty neat. It explains how Ethan can, in both games, take so much punishment and why he can full-on reattach his hand and restore it to full functionality with some herb juice. However, bringing it back again to the game setup, Ethan being made out of mold does mean that if Chris had Ethan tested at the beginning of the game, it would not have worked out so well. But it can still work though with some more tweaking, like maybe he gets tested and needs to somehow escape from some military lab before coming home only to find everything shot up by Chris and friends. After which, the game continues normally with Chris taking Rose and things going wrong with the convoy. Hell, there's other ways things could have still played out, but I'm not going to get into it anymore in this video. At this point I think I'd rather just make another video someday about how Resident Evil could have been set up. The point I'm trying to make is that Capcom could have done better with the setup, and they really should have. So, after Ethan walks into the light, he wakes up in Best Shopkeeper's carriage. During the ride, Duke cements himself as Best Shopkeeper.
Duke, I need a favor. Take me to Miranda.
I assumed as much and am already on the way.
And it is established that Ethan's body has taken too much punishment and is at the end of its rope.
But Ethan, are you sure of this? Your body is, well, falling apart.
But in true Chad Finn fashion, a little thing like that doesn't really bother him.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I have to be.
The path to Miranda is short, and Ethan gets to see where mold people come from before reaching her. Luckily, she is just finishing making Rose a new body, which for some reason weakens her.
My power is leaving me!
Rose! Miranda!
Interesting. Your body certainly isn't normal.
Give Rose to me! Now!
You will see. Once I kill you properly, everything.
Get her now! Let go!
I've spent a lifetime creating this moment. And you tried to take it away from me. I will take what is due. My desires will be fulfilled! Rose is mine!
What the fuck?
So, I really like the general look and design of this fight. Miranda's got this kind of pagan witch goddess thing going on, and she's got different forms, which are all pretty neat. However, the actual fight itself is kind of distracting and weird, and not in a good way. Like, most of the encounter feels okay, but then there's attacks and mechanics which feel kind of like, magic or something, such as the flying blobs of energy which home in on Ethan, or the zone of darkness Miranda creates in the boss arena. Now, Resident Evil has always been soft sci-fi to me, meaning that it is essentially fantasy that uses science instead of magic for its world building and lore. It does this by explaining whatever's happening in vague, science-y theory. And the stuff that isn't really explained is usually alright, because whatever it is at least seems as though it could somehow exist or happen within the context of the game you're playing. But the previously mentioned magic or something in this fight just doesn't really do it for me. Like, she has mold powers, right? Which allow her to shapeshift and make stuff out of mold, but how does that let her create darkness? Does she create a big dome of mold around the arena and block out light? But why would that make the candles around the arena look all desaturated? I don't know, it just doesn't work. I give Resident Evil a lot of slack in this area usually, but this is just a little much, even for me. Overall though, Boss Miranda has an interesting design that aesthetically works as a culmination of the game's folk-tale-y setting, and it was fun enough to actually fight through. Capcom just needed to be a bit more chill with the magic or whatever it was. So, after finally taking her down, Ethan gets a minute with Rose, before Chris awkwardly jogs up to see what's up. It turns out Ethan's dying. Rose seems pretty content though. She's not really bothered by all the loud noises and spooky looking mold trees, but Chris manages to get him moving. However, when it becomes clear that his body is about to fall apart and that he can't continue, Chadton trades Chris the chill baby and his jacket for his shiny bomb detonator before saying goodbye.
Goodbye, Rosemary.
Ethan.
Feeling like he got a good deal, Chris runs off with Rose and the cool jacket. So, to illustrate one final complaint I have, I'll let this next bit play out. I think Capcom really should have shown Ethan's face here. It's a bit cheesy, and I don't know anything about cinematography or whatever, but as he held up the detonator, the camera could have broken from first person and turned to show his face and the detonator. And Capcom could have dumped a bunch of money into animation for his face to really display his emotions through facial expressions as he works up the nerve to press the button. I feel that this would have really cemented him as his own character, instead of the self-insert blank slate he was in Resident Evil 7, which seemed to be one of the goals Capcom had for this game. Then there's a helicopter ending, with this one, that one, Chris and friends, and a lead-in for the next game aboard. The end. Oh, and there's a post-credit scene. It's got grown-up Rose visiting her dad's grave, a weird joke told by a secret agent man.
We have a situation. You're needed. Evelyn.
Don't you ever call me that again.
And a line which makes her seem like she's Moldy Phoenix or something.
I can show you things even Chris doesn't know I can do.
Also, for anyone thinking that Ethan is still alive somehow, look, I know Capcom sometimes has issues just letting characters stay dead, but come on, they wouldn't literally bring back a character within like 10 minutes of screen time. They can at least wait until the next game, around the end, so he can help Rose or whoever the main character is fight the last boss or something, right? Resident Evil 8 is far from a perfect game. It's not as scary as 7 is, there are some questionable lines and voice acting decisions, polarizing pacing choices, and characters behaving in contrived ways. Admittedly, the game sometimes even veers into being pretty outright terrible. However, most of these problems are issues present throughout the entirety of the series.
What's wrong, Steve? Shoot him!
Wait! I can't! No!
Steve! No! Ah!
But people still love more than a few of these games anyway. Be it for the set pieces, the thirst bait, the horror elements, the over-the-top lore, or maybe even all the above. Basically, just like that one friend who wears a shirt streaked with Frito dust, Resident Evil 8 owns the issues it has, gives very few shits, and focuses on facilitating a good time. And overall, it succeeds in doing this. However, I will warn that if you feel like Ethan is just too cringe for you to ever find endearing, then maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to steer clear. The reason for this is because the plot of this game is more personal in nature than most past Resident Evil games. Meaning that if you don't like Ethan at all, then you probably won't care much about anything happening during this game, which I imagine would make the game pretty boring to get through. However, I feel that Ethan is pretty easy to like within the context of a Resident Evil game, especially for fans of the series. Assuming, of course, they're being honest with themselves about previous characters of the series.
Get off my back, old man!
But anyways, here's some pros and cons to summarize. On the pros, we've got the setting, the tried and true story of a parent fighting to save their child, a good visual variety of enemies, solid gameplay, mostly memorable antagonists, incredible attention to detail in the environment, some memorable set pieces and boss fights, reminiscent of Resident Evil 4, but still retains its own identity, Duke and Ethan. Then on the con side we have the inconsistent quality of voice acting. It wasn't as scary as Resident Evil 7, it was way too easy on normal difficulty. A certain contrived and unbelievable decision heavily impacts the events of the story. One of the 5 main antagonists is a throwaway character and only exists to pad the runtime of the game. One of the bosses has a couple mechanics during their fight which somehow manages to break the suspension of disbelief I take into Resident Evil games. There isn't a huge variety of difference in the non-boss enemies and what they actually do. So, is Resident Evil good? Yeah, it's good. You should get it. Wow, that went way longer than I thought it would. And honestly, there's probably a bunch of stuff I should cut out. Maybe doing a video game was a mistake as my first video. But yeah, thanks for watching. Oh yeah, comment, subscribe, and like if you enjoyed the video and my use of dated memes, cringy humor, mediocre editing skills, and especially if you want to see more videos in which I cover stuff I like, stuff I don't like, stuff I've yet to get around to, and stuff I think should be considered hate crimes of some kind. I think I'll probably cover a movie next. Okay, bye.